My name is Aaron Shaw. I'm your host, and I am your biggest advocate for extending your health span. That's what we're here to talk about today. And health span is the amount of time during our lifespan that we are healthy, active, and vibrant. And part of that is making sure that we avoid or delay any sort of disability for as long as possible. And today we're going to talk about one thing you can do that I'm going to actually give you as an assignment. One thing you can do that is going to have a dramatic effect on your health span. But first, I have a confession to make. I overload carry-on bags. So there you have it. Feel better getting it out of my chest. I overload carry-on bags because when you check another bag, sometimes, unless you're a super VIP, you end up paying an extra $150. So that means that in my carry-on bag, I will have a computer, a book, sometimes a couple of books, snacks, water, cords, toiletry bag, some clothes, just enough so just in case I get stuck somewhere that I can still survive for a day or two on what I have on me, what I'm carrying with me. But it leads to a heavy bag. And you may experience this yourself where you're super proud of yourself that you've managed to, you know, save a few bucks. But then the moment of the moment of truth comes when you need to get that into the overhead bin because it's not going to fit in the under the seat in front of you on your flight. And there's a moment where you have to hoist this thing, arguably in a pretty small space, and maybe people are kind of, shoulder to shoulder while you're trying to do it. But there's a moment where you have to hoist this bag up overhead, and that takes strength. That is just a pure reflection of strength. And without strength, we can't accomplish that activity. And that is certainly an outlier of activities that we need to functionally perform and functionally get by on a day-to-day basis. But it is an example nonetheless that strength has an impact on our independence. And we have to understand that weakness is a disability. Weakness is a disability. Now, there are a lot of causes of weakness and a lot of medical conditions that lead to weakness. Heart attack, cardiovascular disease, stroke, neurological conditions, previous injuries, perhaps, muscle wasting diseases and things like that. All of those are their independent conditions and independent problems, but their primary symptom is often weakness. And it's that weakness that leads to loss of independence and disability. So the main reason why people need assistance in living and need long-term care, need to be in a nursing home, it really comes down to weakness. And that affects the ability to sit to stand or getting from the floor to standing. And even before it gets to that point, it really ends up being managing groceries, carrying grocery bags, taking out the trash, carrying laundry baskets, operating in the day-to-day activity that gets more and more difficult as someone has less and less strength. So the punchline is this: more strength equals a more extended health span. But I think a lot of people are doing activities that they think is strength training that is really not. So we're here today to not only understand exactly what the benefits of strength training is, but also to make sure that you feel, this is going to be part of our exercise today, is to feel what true strength training feels like. Additionally, I'm going to go through what is not strength training. And I'm afraid I'm going to burst your bubble for some of you listeners, that there's a little bit of an illusion of some activities and exercises that you may be doing that has its benefits 100%, but is not strength training. But first, let's go through the list of things that strength training has been shown to reduce your risk of. And all of these things are things that we want to reduce our risk of, starting with frailty, falls, losing bone density. How about reducing your risk of fractures? How about reducing your risk of losing mobility? How about reducing the risk of chronic conditions like arthritis, diabetes, cardiovascular disease? Also, strength training, this amazing activity, when done properly, has been shown to enhance mood, improve cognitive function. Isn't that crazy? Like, you can strength train your way and it affects your nervous system in a way that it improves your cognitive function or prevents the decline of cognitive function. I think that's fascinating. Strength training has also been shown to enhance our overall psychological well-being. So literally happy chemicals is basically the side effect of strength training. There's also research that shows that without strength training, some older adults are even more susceptible to depression and anxiety. So it is real. It has a profound effect, an absolute profound effect on our health span, on our independence. And I guess the last little tidbit of thing that as I was doing some research for this, I was reminded that there's evidence that shows that it actually prevents or delays Alzheimer's disease. Strength training can, prevent or delay all of those things that I just talked about. So it is massively important, but it has to be done correctly. And it is my job today to clarify what strength training is exactly, and exactly what strength training is not. Let's start by defining human strength. Human strength is the capacity for us to withstand or produce great force or pressure. Strength training involves using resistance to challenge and overload our muscles. Let me say that again. Strength training, so trying to improve our strength, to improve this physical capacity, involves using resistance to overload our muscles. And the key part of that word overload is overload, not just load it, not just do something that's challenging, but to do more than that, almost more than what it's capable of doing. That is strength training. So when we do strength training, do it properly, it leads to adaptations, including muscle growth, increased strength, and improved overall muscular function. And there's a whole bunch of hormonal changes that happen that obviously that affect that laundry list of problems. There's a whole bunch of real chemical hormonal changes that impact our physical and cognitive abilities that I mentioned before. But for right now, I want to talk about this concept of overload. And I want to use an example that we're all pretty familiar with. If you've ever come back from the grocery store and you've got, whether it's a paper bag or a plastic bag, and it's full of cans of beans and soup and your coffee and some, toilet paper and whatever other stuff you've got. And maybe you've got a bag that doesn't look like it's in great shape. And you start hustling over from the car through the garage or up your driveway. You get inside the house and you're about 10 feet away from the counter where you're going to put this down. And you realize there's a can of beans that's about to fall out of this bag because there's a little hole in the bottom. And the bag's heavy. The bag's full of all of your groceries, and you barely get it up to the countertop. You've made it, okay, but you realize that bag is done. You're lucky you made it that far. It didn't rip through, didn't lose everything, but there's a hole in the bag, but you barely made it. That bag was overloaded. That bag had too much stuff for it to really kind of sustain. So there's a little, you barely got through. You barely barely avoided a big mess and yogurt exploding all over the place, but you made it. But that bag was overloaded. That is overload. So the bag in this case had the capacity to achieve the goal of getting the food to the counter, but it couldn't do any more. Same exact concept needs to be in our minds when we're thinking strength training. So with that in mind, let's go through a list of things that we can categorize as exercise, but not strength training, not having all those same benefits that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. So these activities are good, and these activities may feel like they're strength training, but typically they do not provide enough resistance, enough overload to effectively stimulate muscle growth and strength gains. So here we go. The first very popular exercise, very popular activity that is not strength training is yoga. Yoga is awesome. Flexibility, mobility, stress relief, body awareness is awesome. It's great. Good for your balance, but it is not strength training. I'll give a little caveat with this one. If you are in a yoga class, I think they're now called like power yoga, where you happen to have weights or strong resistance bands that you're using during the class, you may be able to get a little bit of strength, proper strength loading with the class. But generally speaking, yoga is not strength training. There's not enough resistance for the overload that is required for the physiological benefits of strength training. The second thing, Pilates, same concept. Yes, you can get some stability and flexibility through it. great body awareness, controlling movements. Those are all great things to do. And so I would say that Pilates can certainly improve your muscle tone and endurance. Typically, it doesn't provide enough resistance to build significant muscle mass or strength compared to traditional strength training exercises. Number 3, body weight only exercises. So a couple of these would be push-ups or squats or lunges, and these could be pretty good at building endurance, but they typically do not provide enough resistance. Again, you're gonna hear this again. They typically don't provide enough resistance to really stimulate muscle growth, especially for people that have been exercising for any reasonable amount of time. I will say that body weight exercises for my clients are standard warm-up procedure, so they're really good to get the body moving. And before we start adding resistance or dumbbells or resistance bands, body weight exercises are fine. Super helpful when you're on the road. If you're in a hotel room or something like that, you can fatigue muscles doing body weight exercises. Absolutely. You can break a sweat. You can burn calories. You can have, stimulate your body awareness. All of that stuff is great. Not strength training. This one will give one more caveat too. If somebody is really deconditioned, is maybe not exercised perhaps ever before or not for many, many, many years, and they're really deconditioned, perhaps for a short period of time, doing something like a body weight squat, if 8 or 10 repetitions is so challenging for somebody that their legs are burning from that, then yes, in that moment, that person may get some strength gains out of it, but that is by far atypical, not usual. The fourth activity that is exercise, and it's an exercise that I love, but it is not strength training, that is cardiovascular exercise. So I am a cyclist. I've been my whole life. It was a brief couple of years after I retired from racing on the road where I stopped cycling. And so what did I do? I started running because I'm an endurance athlete. I have had exhausted legs. I've had quadriceps that look like I could lift a truck. I could not. So I've had great cardiovascular health, but it is not strength training. It is not maximizing my strength through cardiovascular exercise. So cardiovascular exercise is good for improving muscular endurance and muscle tone, but again, it's typically not enough resistance to really stimulate strength changes. The fifth and final that is really common these days, but is not strength training, is functional fitness classes. So functional fitness classes kind of covers a wide array of classes, and it involves some mobility stuff. Certainly, breaking a sweat, burning calories seems to be the number one goal of these classes that I've seen, which in and of itself is great. It is a great thing to do. It does a lot of body weight, maybe use some light dumbbells from what I've seen. But again, there's not enough progressive overload to really produce these strength changes that we're talking about, to have all of those benefits that we talked about at the beginning. So those are the 5 common activities that are absolutely in the exercise bucket, absolutely in the bucket of good things to do. And to be clear, I am not saying do not do those things. I think they are all great to do. So please, no need to send me hate mail. I'm a believer in people doing yoga and Pilates and body weight stuff. All that stuff is great. But it is not the same as proper strength training, and you don't get the same benefits as proper strength training when you do those other things. So in order to have true strength gains and really maximize muscle growth, we have to do strength training correctly. And I'll take pause here for a second to really talk about muscle growth, because I think there's a little bit of a hesitation with people. And in my experience, it's sometimes women who are kind of don't like the idea of getting bulky. That when I talk about muscle growth, we are talking, some would say, sadly, kind of imperceivable for most people. I mean, if you ever go to the gym and you see somebody, or you're walking down the street and you see somebody with like bulging muscles, a couple things have to happen for that. Assuming it's all natural through natural exercise and not chemically enhanced. In order to have big bulging muscles, somebody has to put in a tremendous amount of time over years and years and years, and years and years and years doing strength training specifically, and really kind of making sure they're doing things specific to grow their muscles. And to have big bulky muscles, they have to have a calorie surplus. They have to be eating consuming more calories to feed these big growing muscles. So the chance of you doing proper strength training and suddenly waking up one day and being muscle bound and massively, ripped for some reason is not going to happen. And I would say most of us would say that's such a bummer because a lot of us would like to have, well-defined muscles. It doesn't happen. Not that easily. So we're talking we're talking about increasing muscle size in a very human, not bodybuilder kind of way. So let's move our way towards our exercise assignment for this lesson. First, let's think about strength, about exercise, and about getting our body to adapt. It has to be overloaded. It has to be atypical, has to be unusual, has to be challenging and even uncomfortable a little bit to be considered overload to the point where your body really decides it has to change. Your body has to decide that it's going to adapt to the demands that you're placing upon it. If you don't place any demands on your body whatsoever, muscles atrophy, bones get brittle, cardiovascular health declines. When we increase the demands in a thoughtful, controlled, intentional sort of way over time, your body adapts to that in a very positive way. Let's go through our one exercise that we're going to do so you can feel what strength training feels like. This exercise is only going to take maybe 10 minutes at the most. The piece of equipment that you will need to do will be to have a dumbbell, or less ideal but not impossible would be a resistance band. And we're going to pick one exercise to do, one movement that I think we're all very familiar with. And success is you feeling the effort of strength training. This exercise is going to be a bicep curl. It's very natural if somebody handed you a 5-pound dumbbell, or if you picked one up off the floor, or somebody said, hey, pick that up. The natural movement is just kind of bend your elbow and do a curl. So you're going to pick a weight, and I'm going to make up some numbers here. So everybody's different. I have several clients who are kind of all over the scale on, if I were to say to do a bicep curl, some would pick up a 5 or 6 pound weight, others would pick up a 25-pound weight, and some would pick up even more than that. So you're going to have to find the sweet spot for you by following along with this exercise. So you're going to pick up a dumbbell with a resistance that you think you can do 12, maybe 15 repetitions of bicep curls with medium effort. This is going to be your warm-up set. So 12 to 15 repetitions, medium effort. So let's call that 5 on a 10 scale of effort. If 10 is just like as hard as you could possibly go, this is medium. You're going to take 1 or 2 seconds to bend your elbow to do that curl, 1 or 2 seconds to lower it down, 1 or 2 seconds to bring it back up. Nice and slow, nice and rhythmic. You get 12 repetitions, you get 15 repetitions. It was a little bit effortful by the end. You feel your muscles kind of warming up a little bit. Maybe you've done enough where you want to okay, I want to set it down. That was a good warm up. That was good enough. So after you rest for 1 minute, you're going to pick a heavier resistance and you're going to do another set. And this next set is going to start the actual proper strength training. So you're going to pick a resistance that is so challenging that you think you can only do maybe 8 repetitions. So maybe 8 bicep curls. The key here is you're going to maintain really good form. So you're not going to be twisting or contorting yourself or hunching your shoulder in any sort of way. You're standing, you're stable, and you're doing this bicep curl. By the time you get to repetition number 8, that last repetition should feel really difficult, should feel really heavy. Your intensity, your effort with that should be an 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9 out of 10, like really hard. And you're going to stop at repetition. It's going to be around 8 repetitions. And I want you, when you set down that weight, I want you to feel like you could have done 1 more repetition with good form, but definitely not 2. If you feel like you could have done 3, 4, 5 more repetitions, that means the weight was not heavy enough. And this is where people make the mistake of following the number of repetitions that are assigned to them, but not being mindful of the amount of resistance, not being mindful of the amount of effort it should take to achieve those repetitions. So if that last repetition was not really, really hard, that means you weren't lifting a weight that was heavy enough for you. So after you've done that first set, you're going to rest for 2 minutes, 2 very long minutes. We're not going to wait. We're going to keep the podcast going here, but you're going to repeat that exercise again. You're going to do another set. Same thing. Hopefully you've kind of fine-tuned that weight, and you're going to shoot for about 8, maybe 10 repetitions. It's probably going to feel a little bit harder than the first set even. So your muscles been activated, it's been warmed up, it's been activated. But you get to that repetition, let's say repetition number 8, and maybe you're curling 15 pounds, 20 pounds, and that last rep is really, really hard. I mean, really hard. By the time you get to repetition 8, you're almost at the point where you're going to start like hunching your shoulder and tweaking your back and stuff. That's the last rep. Set it down. Rest for 2 more minutes. And then last but not least, after that last 2 minutes rest, you can do a third set. So if you can stick with the same weight as you did the first time, you may only be able to do 6 or 7 reps. You may be that tired. So maybe you started with a 20-pound curl and you did the first set, 8 reps. Second set, 8 reps. Third set, same 20 pounds. You may feel like, holy cow, I don't know if I can get 8 out of this. You may not. That's fine. Get 6 out of it, maybe 7 out of it. That's fine. Make sure your form is perfect, and that last repetition is really hard. And when you're done with that last rep, set it down. Congratulations. You've just done strength training. Your body is now adapting to what you asked it to do. Your body, your bicep, has been overloaded. Your bicep is that bag with a little tear in it, with your groceries almost ready to fall out of it. That's been overloaded. The great thing about your muscles is that they adapt to that. They've been stimulated to be stronger. They've been stimulated to overcome or avoid all that list of bad things that happen that lead to weakness and disability. You've done that because you've done an exercise with a resistance and repetitions that overloaded that muscle. So if your effort was an 8 out of 10 or even a 9 out of 10, the last few repetitions of each of those sets with good form, that is it. You've done it. If after any set, when you put the weight down, if you feel like you could have done another 2 or 3 or 4 repetitions, that means the weight was not heavy enough. You didn't have enough resistance. Because if you're doing that bicep curl and you're on repetition 12 and 13 and 14, and even though you were thinking you were only going to do 10, but if I was there in front of you saying, come on, do a few more, do what you can, keep going, and you were on repetition 14 and maybe squeezing out repetition 15, you're now working on muscular endurance, not strength. It's different. So the challenge here is to find the right amount of resistance for every exercise that you're going to do for strength training. So compared to some exercise classes and exercises that I've seen people do, if you want to be able to lift a bag into the overhead compartment of the airplane, you need strength. If you were to take a 5-pound dumbbell and lift it over your head 10 times, 15 times, 20 times, 30 times, that is not going to help you lift that 30-pound bag into the overhead compartment. It's not enough resistance. So the take-home message is to make sure that you have strength training integrated into your regular health and fitness program. Make sure that you are doing strength training in a way that is really going to give you the results that you want, the results that you need for an expanded health span. Strength training, when done well, is incredibly effective. You can do it on arguably very little time when done properly, and it will reduce your risk of a whole long list of conditions that lead to disability. The answer is strength training. I really hope you give this exercise a try because it can really make a huge difference on how you approach a day that you go to the gym or a day that you join an exercise class. You want to make sure that you are stimulating your muscles in a way that literally and specifically will improve your strength, not just burn calories, not just improve your mobility, not just improve your cardiovascular health, but specifically your strength. Please don't miss that component. I hope you learned a little bit about strength training and the value of investing in your health span, and I hope you don't overload your overhead bag that much. If you want to learn more about strength training, healthy habits, nutrition, and other quick and easy tips that you can apply to your life that will extend your health span, please subscribe to this podcast. If you know someone who wants to extend their health span, please share this podcast with them as well. In the show notes, I'll share my contact information where you can sign up for my monthly newsletter that I send my coaching clients, where I dive a little bit deeper into all these topics. But until next time, stay healthy. Here's your health. Cheers.